As COVID cases rise yet again, the province announcing a new guideline for those exposed to COVID-19 cases. The feds, they say a proof of vaccination document is in the works. And working towards the car of the future with support from the government as it invests in the auto sector in this region. We take a live look outside where things have started to calm down. Pretty hectic this afternoon. All those thunderstorm warnings, they've ended. Now watches, a heat warning in play for Windsor, Essex. I'm Chris Ensing. Thanks for joining us. Thousands without power as a severe thunderstorm rolled through our area. Environment Canada saying those warnings are over. A severe thunderstorm watch in place. Let's take a look at the moments before it hit out in LaSalle. This video you're seeing here from 4 this afternoon. Clouds spinning above homes. LaSalle Fire out on multiple calls for downed wires in the area. And here's what police were responding to one of their calls about trees on hydro lines, asking people to stay away if they see something like that. This, what you're looking at, was out in Cottam, tree branches, recycling bins going across the road, smashing into vehicles. That's around 4:30. And this here, posted by Kyle Woods out in Comber, a roof blown right off of a house. We're bringing Colette Kennedy now. What we're looking at there, the power of these storms.
Yeah, that's right, Chris, because we're talking about some of those winds gusting to 90, even 100 kilometers an hour. So really strong winds. Not only that, these storms, as they were moving in, crossing that international border coming out of Michigan, were moving at about 75, 85 kilometers an hour heading eastward. And, you know, that's pretty fast for what we see with storms like this. Even when they're strong, sometimes you'll see, you know, maybe 40, 50, that kind of thing. So they were really moving at a clip. We're in this watch area. You can see areas in red, though, still severe thunderstorm warnings, and that's basically following along with that same line. So just kind of looking at what's happening now, this is just some of the residual stuff behind the main line, which is pushed off to the east of us. But I want to back this up and stop it. We saw the severe thunderstorm warnings drop around 3:30 as these were coming out of Michigan, and here it is 4 o'clock, and you can see all of those storms moving through. So areas like Amherstburg and LaSalle obviously getting hit through there, and Lakeshore as well. And then as this goes through, now it's tracking eastward. I'm more concerned kind of around Stratford and that region with some of the cells I'm seeing. But tonight there'll be another wave, not as intense likely, but just so you know that your forecast for the overnight hours is that we may have some active weather coming back towards us. And looking at those overnight lows, Chris, not really giving us much relief. The heat warning carries on, but I'll have more of that coming up in the show.
Absolutely. Quite the line of storms there. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Now, thousands of folks across Windsor, Essex without power right now. A quick recap of what we're seeing. Hydro One reporting large outages in Kingsville and Essex. More than 11,000 people without power in LaSalle and Amherstburg. No restoration time yet on when they'll be back up. A relative few outages in Windsor, according to NWIN. There was at one point 1,000 plus, about 500 people without power, mostly concentrated in South Windsor. The federal government is investing in the car of the future, a zero-emissions vehicle, Canada's first, with deep connections to Windsor, Essex. The CBC's Jennifer LaGrasso was at that announcement. She joins us now live. Jen, what does this investment mean for the area?
Chris, it means more jobs and more business opportunities in our region. The federal government is investing $5 million into the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association's Project Aero, which is working towards the creation of a self-driving, zero-emission vehicle. This is something the group's been working on for more than a year, but it's the first time the government has hopped on board to invest in the association and in the project.
Government's investment today is proof, at least in their eyes, that we are an effective vehicle for economic development for this industry in this region, and they're betting on our ability to bring the Canadian message around the world.
The virtual and digital build of the car are nearly complete, and a physical version is expected by the end of next year. According to the association, the new funds will create 80 jobs and go to about 40 Windsor-based companies that are helping to produce the vehicle.
Jen, whenever you hear about jobs being created in the auto sector, a big deal. How are people reacting?
Well, one local union head who represents auto workers told me it's great news and will help turn Windsor into an auto tech hub.
This is for the future. This is bringing technology, these tech companies, the ability to be able to, you know, really dig deep in what the new technologies will be, and we'll be able to create jobs from around that. I mean, this is so important for us. We talk about green economies. We talk about the just transition, you know, to those type of jobs. We got to be ready for that.
In total, the provincial and federal governments have invested $7 million into the project. APMA says the vehicle, its virtual and digital build, will cost $30 million by the end. This time next year, they hope to have the bones of a physical build. Chris.
Thanks for this, Jen. CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa live tonight. Ontario is spelling out new rules that cover those who are fully vaccinated and those who are not. The province has seen 6 straight days with more than 300 new infections. The opposition says there's room to do more. Magda Gaberselassie has the story.
Harley Yankovic and Gary Horton will soon be among Ontario's fully vaccinated, and they call on others to do the same.
We don't want to go into another lockdown, so it's best that everyone just works together, gets vaccinated.
As they got their second shots at this vaccine clinic today, Ontario released new guidelines for those exposed to COVID-19 cases. For the vaccinated, it calls for fewer restrictions, while the unvaccinated could self-isolate for 10 days and get 2 tests during that time. The fully vaccinated, who don't have symptoms, may not have to self-isolate. It all depends on your public health unit.
It's an advantage when you think about it of being vaccinated. Then even if somebody in your workplace or your school does have COVID and there was an exposure, you still will be able to continue with your work and your school.
So far, 72% of those eligible are fully vaccinated in the province. Children under the age of 12 can't get vaccines. And with the new school year around the corner, this could push parents to get their shots, says this epidemiologist.
The biggest concern epidemiologically for school openings, beyond the safety of the kids themselves, obviously, is the extent to which schools can serve to accelerate the epidemic. So we have to take steps to blunt that possibility, and this is one of those steps.
Meanwhile, calls for more steps continue. The Liberals and NDP want COVID-19 vaccinations to be mandated for the healthcare and education fields, as well as vaccine certificates across the province. So far, the government has no plans to do that, but Dimitri Slobin, who is getting his second shot today, thinks that should happen.
I interact with people every day. If I know someone is vaccinated, it'll make my job easier.
Magda Gaberselassie, CBC News, Toronto.
As some health officials say the country is in the 4th wave, Windsor's cases continue to trend upwards. 21 more cases today. Our active case count continuing to rise. We're now at 157. About a third are variants of concern. One more person has died since yesterday, a man who is in his 80s. More than half of the 215 people who tested positive for COVID-19 in the last 2 weeks, they were under the age of 29, 30% between the ages of 30 and 49. Dr. Wajid Ahmed has said that the cases we're seeing now are among the unvaccinated. Now, here's where the vaccination rate sits for the region compared to what we're seeing in the province. This is people 12 and older, no vaccine approved for kids younger in Canada yet. Windsor, as you see in the red there, at 77%, just below what we're seeing across the province. Fully vaccinated, we're seeing the same story. Once again, Windsor in red there, nearly 2/3 of people 12 and older vaccinated in the province. It's slightly lower in Windsor, Essex. If you want to live on campus at St. Clair College this fall, you'll have to have received at least a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine before you can move in.
It's important when you're looking at residence, and the experience of living in a residence is dealing with people and dealing and sitting in groups and being around people because it's more social, I guess, than just walking down a hall. Now, of course, someone will say, well, why? How do you do that to a student? Well, the point is there's plenty of places to live in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent if you choose not to be on our campus. And so that was our first step in the discussions over the last probably 3 to 5 months.
Students and residents will still need to get their second shots within a certain window of time. This also applies for varsity athletes, coaches, and staff. There are some exemptions, like for medical reasons. That said, vaccines will not be mandated for any other on-campus activities, though it is encouraged. At this time, the University of Windsor does not have any kind of mandatory vaccine policy in place for on-campus or in residence. The federal government says it's working with provinces to create a proof of vaccination document that Canadians can use for international travel.
These credentials will have a common design across all provinces. They will include the holder's COVID-19 vaccination history including the vaccine types, date, and location.
Officials say they expect to have a vaccination credential for travel in place by early fall, but no specific date has been announced. The government expects the credentials to be digital, but it will also be available for those without access to a device. Canadians would be able to present their credential for access to a foreign country and when returning home. Ottawa is leaving the door open to having this vaccine certification used domestically if provinces are interested. The federal government says that it is going to appeal the stiff sentence that's been handed down to Canadian Michael Spavor by a Chinese court. Along with the government, Canada's ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, is condemning the sentence and the legal process. Federal officials say they are going to double down on their efforts to win the release of Spavor and fellow Canadian Michael Kovrig. Freelance reporter Patrick Falk has the details from Beijing.
Well, as we know now, Michael Spavor has been found guilty of espionage and was sentenced to 11 years in prison. He's been ordered to pay a fine of 50,000 RMB, which is the equivalent of around $9,600 and he's also to be deported. At Canada's embassy in Beijing here this morning, diplomats from 25 different countries gathered to offer their support and to stand in solidarity with Canada. And we were able to track the movements of Ambassador Barton. We know, of course, that he was able to attend the verdict in Dandong, and afterwards he issued a statement to condemn the verdict and also to say that Canada would double down efforts to try and secure the release of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. He was also able to go and meet with Michael Spavor after the verdict announcement. He went to the detention centre, which is situated around 40 minutes outside of the city of Dandong, and he was able to relay this message from Michael Spavor. Michael Spavor wanted to say thank you to his supporters and to let people know that he was in good spirits and also say that he wanted to come home. He has, of course, been detained in China now for a total of 976 days. A lot's been made of the fact that he is to be deported, but the reality is we just don't know when that's going to happen. He does have the right to appeal this verdict in the coming days, but of course so much of what happens as far as Canada is concerned to him and to Michael Kovrig as well is hinging on what happens in the case of Meng Wanzhou in Canada. Patrick Falk for CBC News, Beijing.
Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou went back to court in Vancouver today as she continues her fight against extradition to the United States. The BC Supreme Court is hearing the first day of testimony in the formal hearing. Her legal team has spent nearly 3 years arguing the trial shouldn't take place. Meng was arrested at Vancouver's International Airport in December 2018 on fraud charges related to U.S. economic sanctions against Iran. And when we come back, a look at a brand new kind of theater experience. We'll take you straight there after the break also. A live look at the conditions right now. Not as bad as it once was, but are we out of the woods? Colette Kennedy joins us with a look next. It's a whole new kind of stage, a new group bringing a site-specific theater experience to a number of cities like Paris and Rome, and now it's here. You can download an app, listen on your phones, and get lost in the story that takes place in the streets of the city.
The idea came from, and it was sort of born, it's the brainchild of the European creative team, who were at the height of their Parisian lockdown with nothing to do and came up with this extraordinary idea of how to do entirely COVID-safe theater through the streets of Paris. The play isn't about the pandemic, it isn't about COVID, but it's very much of COVID and of its time, and deals with the deep emotional needs that people have been feeling for so long that we're now beginning to come out of. As a consequence of hearing the dialogue and the thoughts in your own head, it becomes a very intimate experience, and you feel very privileged at the end of it to have listened so intimately and so closely to another person's journey that usually matches something that you've felt yourself for the last 18 months.
So the track is already set, the audience listens to the track, and the actors embody the story. And what's really lovely about it is that you eventually start to feel like you're inside a movie.
I think there's something magical about it. I think, you're having this shared experience with these other audience members. You put the earbuds in and suddenly you're downtown and you're still surrounded by all of the people and the trucks and the buildings, but somehow it's more magical, somehow it's more beautiful, and you're sharing this beautiful experience with all of these other audience members, and it's almost like you're in on a secret.
The very concept of talking to a stranger, it's something that a lot of us maybe didn't do in the first place, but of those of us who did, it's a skill we've kind of forgotten. And so this show it really has the power to help us remember some of our social skills.
We're just so excited to have something in the downtown core that could bring joy and bring people back to the streets and to the businesses. So I'm just so thankful that people have rallied and brought this piece, and very humbled that we get the chance to do it.
It's pretty creative. Some wild conditions out there in our area earlier, but we want to show you something out of London, where another tornado has been confirmed to have touched down in southwestern Ontario this summer. Now, this was posted yesterday afternoon, showing what has now been confirmed by a group from Western University as a tornado. It's an EF0, according to them, so a weak tornado. Winds hitting 115 kilometers an hour, and that's just past the airport there. We bring Colette Kennedy back in again. What a summer.
Yeah, really, right, Chris? And that was kind of a tough one for a couple of reasons. I had seen that video yesterday and kind of the images. It's very hard to tell whether that was touching down because it's way out there behind the airplane and hangar and everything. And we had funnel cloud advisories, right? Because conditions for funnel clouds were there. But also, when you're talking about it being weak like that, so it was an EF0. So what is great is that we have Northern Tornadoes Project, who you were mentioning from Western University, for them to go and send a crew and get in there and be like, okay, yeah, this is for sure what was happening. Well, for sure what's happening is, active weather again today. We know that we were looking at this off the top of the show, some of the storms in that line that have been pushing through. You see where the warnings are now, and why are the warnings split like this? Because that's basically what's happened with that main line that was moving so quickly at 75, 85 kilometers an hour. It's slowed down now, more like we're seeing tracking eastward at about 55 kilometers an hour. We just have some of the residual stuff behind it in play, and that's where it's kind of splitting as it's coming through the lower Great Lakes here. So as it does, seeing some more intense cells, I was mentioning around Stratford, headed towards Kitchener-Waterloo, and probably towards the Niagara region as well, and that's why the warnings are following those particular cells and that development. Another map we're so familiar with, right, this week, because our heat warnings carrying on, and we're going to see these likely changing over for Friday, okay? Because still Thursday night, and Friday's kind of the transition day, but then we should finally get some relief, and more so you'll feel it for the weekend, where it's going to be more comfortable. And I know for some who have some breathing issues, the air quality can be poor as well, so it will be very nice to kind of clear things out. Current temperatures, well, those storms will sure do one thing. They'll bring those temperatures down, albeit sometimes sort of briefly. The humidex values, though, still up there around 30. And another round, I do have to say again, that overnight tonight through the wee morning hours, you may hear that rumble of thunder. They shouldn't be as strong or packing as much of a punch, but know that that's there. And then it's kind of more of a close call Thursday evening. So I'm keeping it more towards the Leamington area in terms of showers and thunderstorms. Friday, same thing. It kind of skims to the south of us, so a chance of showers. Temperatures, though, tonight, Still in those low 20s, right? What can you do here? And temperatures tomorrow, still in those low 30s with humidex values in the low 40s. And then there's your transition, and then there's the easier breathing that will come, Chris.
No, it's nice to breathe easy after everything we saw this afternoon, too. Thanks for keeping us on top of this.
That's right, of course.
Now, up next, we take you to Newfoundland, where instead of these booming thunderstorms, they're seeing yarn bombs. It's pretty cool. Canada's top military member plans to return to his post. Admiral Art MacDonald wants to resume his job as Chief of Defence Staff. MacDonald stepped down as commander of the Canadian Armed Forces in February when he came under a military investigation over allegations of sexual misconduct. That investigation finished last week, and the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service opted not to charge him. It's not clear if his return has the blessing of the Prime Minister. The Defence Minister says MacDonald will remain on leave. The Taliban is continuing its rapid offensive in Afghanistan, now controls about 2/3 of the country. Dominic Politis has more on the situation.
The speed of the Taliban's advance has shocked Afghanistan's government and its allies, including the United States. Its fighters now control 65% of the country, having taken 9 of 34 provincial capitals in just 6 days. 3 of those have gone in the last 24 hours alone. Other provincial capitals currently at risk include Farah and Herat in the west and Lashkargah and Kandahar in the south. But we're also hearing reports out of Russia today, and these are reports quoting the Russian defense minister, that the Taliban has also taken control of Afghanistan's borders with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, while US media reports citing unnamed intelligence officials say the group's fighters could isolate the capital Kabul within the next 30 days and even take it over completely within 90. Now, the US military is of course still assisting government forces to take on the Taliban, but yesterday the US President Joe Biden urged Afghans to unite and fight for their homeland.
The United States, I'll insist we continue to keep the commitments we made of providing close air support, making sure that their Air Force functions and is operable, resupplying their forces with food and equipment, and paying all their salaries. But they've got to want to fight.
The United Nations estimates that more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in the past month due to the fighting. It's also very concerned about reports of potential war crimes and crimes against humanity taking place on the ground. Dominic Villite, CBC News, London.
A little town in northeastern Newfoundland has been hit by an explosion of color. The unique graffiti popping up around Twillingate, the work of the rock vandal, who also goes by the name Nina Elliott.
So what I do is I use crochet and I make two-dimensional images, like kind of like graffiti, but with crochet, and then I throw it on the wall. I moved to Twillingate in 2012, and I knew how to knit, and I didn't know anybody when I landed here, and I got a little bit bored with making hats and scarves, and then I heard about yarn bombing, so I thought I'd give it a try, and I got really addicted because you can make anything. So in like making an outdoor art gallery, I've kind of like dragged everything out of my shed. I've been making for years and threw them all up on the Ashbourne premises, which is like this beautiful historic building, but it's also, you know, in rough boarded up condition. So I have put up a mummer and a whale and Sasquatch and Homer Simpson and Waldo and Wenda, his girlfriend, and Woof, his dog, and also a Queen's Guard. When I first started yarn bombing, I kind of like expected that people were going to give me a hard time or tell me to stop, but nobody has told me to stop. 5 years later, I'm still going. People are super positive. It's fun for me to drive around and see that I've got stuff kind of all over town, but also super fun to see people stopping and taking photos and then sharing on social media. So that's like the kind of cycle of it, that people can have fun finding it and then have fun posing with it, and then they can hit me up on Instagram and let me know that they found it, and I can see how they engage with it, because everybody kind of engages with something differently, and that's always fun to see how people do that.
It's hard to imagine making that landscape prettier, but she has managed to do just that. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media too. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.